Hey everyone, George here and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to dive into breeding discus fish and how to make it successful in a way that does not absolutely make you crazy. Everything that you've heard about raising discus, throw it out the window. The breeding process, I'm going to simplify it for you today, make it easier for you to understand, but we're going to cover it in depth. So grab yourself your favorite beverage, a snack, and sit down and be prepared to learn a lot about the process of breeding discus fish. Hang on, we'll be right back. Hey everyone, George here and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about breeding discus and we're going to talk about some of the myths behind this amazing natural phenomenon that happens with discus fish. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing to see, but it's also something that can be extremely difficult for people who are just starting out with this, and I want to talk today about making this a lot easier for those of you who are just getting into the process of breeding discus fish. Now I'm going to show you an actual breeding tank that I've got set up right now where we have some free swimming discus that have just maybe a day or two ago started the free swimming process, and we'll go through step by step what happens in the breeding process. Now the first thing you want to do is, let's talk about water parameters. I do not chase water parameters. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, and to be honest with you, I learned this from Joey over at DIY, was chasing water parameters is absolutely insane. Trying to do that is going to be something that is going to be almost impossible to make perfect. What I try to do is make every tank in my gallery exactly the same. So in other words, if you were to go around to every tank in my system, in my gallery, you will find that the water parameters are exactly the same because I'm using tap water that comes right out of my tap. The only thing that I'm doing to that water is conditioning it to take chlorine out, and other than that, I'm doing absolutely nothing to it. Now, keeping your discus at a temperature that is in the correct, I would say the correct mode for your discus to be stimulated to spawn, anywhere from 82 to 86 degrees is perfect. Discus like warmer water, that's just simply a fact, and to get them to spawn, you typically have to do a couple of things maybe in your tank when they're in there. First of all, you've got to have a proven pair. Number one, a proven pair is a set of discus fish that are similar in color, if not exact. I try to find exact pairs, in other words, fish that are the exact type of species, and find pairs within that group. Now, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start out, if you want to buy a pair of discus that are proven breeders, that does not mean that when you buy them and you get them home and you put them in your breeding tank that they're going to do exactly what they are supposed to have done in the tank where you bought them from, because things change. Now, it may take some time, but eventually they will breed. If they're a young pair and they are not parents that have done this before and have had successful fry that have grown, you may go through 4, 5, 6, 7, or even 10 different spawns where they will get to certain stages and the discus will eat the babies. Now, the reason why that happens sometimes is because we will do the water changes, and the water changes, I know we always talk about how pure and everything the water has to be, but if you have a well-seasoned tank and your tank is clean otherwise, do not bother with a lot of water changes during this spawning period, because number one, when you're doing that, you're changing the environment in the tank to the point where the discus are stimulated to try to spawn again. And what that means is if you have fresh eggs or wigglers or even babies that are free swimming, they're going to eat those babies sometimes if they're not seasoned parents, because this changing of the water or changing the water parameters in the tank or making it appear as though in nature, like in the Amazon, like get a good rain and that kind of thing, that can stimulate a pair to spawn. Same thing happens in your tank. If you're messing around with water changes during this period, I'm not saying don't do water changes. What I'm saying is during this period, try to avoid the water changes and make sure that you have a well-seasoned tank. That way you'll have more success with your discus actually going through the whole process of laying the eggs, taking care of the eggs over a period of time. Sometimes you have to put a cage around them. That's something I don't recommend doing, but if you feel that this is something that's going to help you after your discus have spawned and prevent them from eating the eggs, you can do that. I like to think that if I have a good set of parents, that they're not going to eat these eggs as long as I don't disrupt the water parameters in the tank, changing temperatures, changing water so much that the cleaner water stimulates, again, like I said, that spawning stimulation that goes on. And I have found success in doing this. And this is one of the things that if you watch the guys that do this for a living or successful at doing this, water parameters and screwing around with the water is really something that you want to try to avoid. Now, I've had 4 or 5 successful discus spawns where I have actually grown the fish out full size, and I've made money off these fish because I've grown them to the point where they're big enough to sell to a store. Now, in order to get to that point, I learned lessons along the way that were very valuable to me because I was really not knowledgeable. And like I said, watching Joey on DIY, watching a couple of other people out there that do things a little more simplistic is really the way to go. You can overdo this, you can make this very complicated, or you can make it simple. Now, one of the things I want to talk about with your tanks, I use 20-gallon tanks for breeding my discus fish. This is plenty enough space for your discus to move around and to successfully spawn and have enough room to actually raise their babies up until 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how long you want to leave them in there. But talking about the tank itself, before we get into any of this other stuff, let's talk about the actual setup of the tank. Like I said, a 20-gallon tank is perfect. A well-seasoned 20-gallon tank. Now, some of my tanks have been running for 2 or 3 years, and I have completely removed everything from them, cleaned them out, but leaving the filtration in place so that I don't disrupt that. Let it settle out for a couple of weeks and balance itself out, getting it back to just a plain tank with nothing in there, including, I don't paint my tanks. A lot of people paint their tanks because they believe that this is the only way to do this. What I have found is getting some corrugated plastic that measures exactly the back and the 2 sides. The only size that you want open is the front side of the tank, and sometimes you may even have to cover that slightly for the first few days when your discus babies become free swimmers, but we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But what I try to do is put some corrugated plastic in there, and I'm going to show this to you. Very, very easy to do, very successful, easy to clean, something that you can remove in a matter of minutes, clean it off, put it back in, and you've got a clean and perfect tank at that point where your discus are seeing. Now, I don't use blue, I use white, because this gives the best chance for the babies to see the contrast of the dark parent and the cone that's in there as being the only objects where they are drawn to going. Now, I make sure that all the corners are covered. I use rimless tanks, because tanks that have black on the top of them or down the sides or at the bottom is going to sometimes create an environment where the babies will go to that area and avoid the parents, and at this point just basically starve to death because they never ever connect with the parents. You can avoid this by using a rimless tank. I use water box tanks. I'm not trying to promote water box, but these are perfect 20-gallon tanks, and I absolutely love them. I have several of them that were sitting in my garage, and I thought, well, you know, using these tanks for breeding is absolutely perfect. So now let's talk about this tank again. As I said, I use corrugated plastic inserts in here so that I can easily remove them and clean them, or I can sometimes leave them in the tank and just scrub them down very lightly and get the debris out of there. Now, as far as not doing water changes, what I would tell you is this: do very, very small water changes during this process, but only after your discus have become free swimmers. Do not bother with doing any water changes early on. I know there's controversy over this, but what I'm doing is tried and true. It's something that I know works because I've been doing it for a long time, and every single time it works with every breeding pair that I have. And once these parents become successful parents and have had several spawns, and they start to take care of the babies, and they get through the spawn period, the wiggler period, the free swimming period, and they get to have these babies eating off their slime coat. This is a miracle, a true miracle in watching fish that actually will take care of their own, and you need to do absolutely nothing except for, at some point here, start feeding your babies. And I'm going to get into some controversial parts about that too as we talk about this. This is going to be a little bit longer video, so sit down and get yourself a cup of coffee or something to snack on and watch this video, but pay attention to what I'm saying here, because it's important and it's going to save you a lot of problems down the road. Now, one of the things that I would tell you is this: that if you are successfully getting to the point of getting free swimming fish, you're going to tell yourself, well, when do I need to separate the babies from the parents? The bottom line is, at this point here, you're going to start to do water changes, and I don't recommend doing anything more than like a 20% water change. And the reason for that is, again, even if these fish are large enough to where they appear that the parents are not going to eat them or harm them, if you do too much of a water change and you stimulate that spawning again with your discus, you are going to get into a situation where the parents are going to go after the babies just because they want to get rid of them so that they can spawn again. This is just an instinctual thing that they have going on, and it's something that you're going to find is incredibly built into them as a natural instinct to want to spawn. And you want to keep that instinct down to a minimum by making sure that you don't overdo the water changes. I say about a 20% water change every couple of days. Once these babies are latching on to the parents successfully, eating off the slime coat, and at this point you can start doing some 20% water changes. I've had people tell me that they don't do any water changes for 6 weeks. I don't believe in that, because I think that you have to keep your water clean enough to where you don't create an environment where your parents or your young babies or wigglers or whatever start to get diseased And the only way that you're going to do that is by keeping your water semi-clean. If you have a well-seasoned tank, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, something that's been running for a long time, and you know that there's no disease in that tank, you're not going to have to worry about these water changes that much. Now, one of the things that you're going to deal with is, what do you feed the parents during this process? Feeding your parents twice a day a very small amount of food. Now, I mean a very small amount of food, and for a good reason. The reason why is because they don't need that much. Some people believe, well, if you feed them really well, the slime coat's going to be better and whatever. The discus themselves have the ability to build that slime coat, and that slime coat will change as your young get bigger. Whatever the needs are for the young, the slime coat will provide that, and that slime coat will change over that 6 or 8 week period that these babies are with the parents, and they will get everything that they need as far as eating goes. And we'll talk about, when you're feeding the parents, how to stimulate the young to eat the same thing that the parents are eating as we go along here. And we'll also talk about supplementing the babies with food so that they don't create an environment where your discus are being overfed on. In other words, the babies are eating on the slime coat to the point where they're damaging the skin of your discus fish. And once you start to see that, that can be a real problem, because you can get disease really quickly, infections and that sort of thing. You don't want to get to the point where that's happening. If you start to see that happening, remove the parents immediately, and or at least the one parent, because one parent can actually take care of these fish 100%, but it's best to have both of them in there. But if you're seeing one of the parents get a spot on their body where it looks like there's been overfeeding going on by the young, feeding off that slime coat, then that's something you need to be concerned about, and something you need to deal with right away. Because at that point, as I said, it's very easy for your discus parents to be susceptible to some diseases. And the last thing you want to do is lose one or both of the parents of your mating pair, because once one's gone, finding another partner for that fish is going to be almost impossible. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into this video. And I hope this video is not too long, but while we're talking about this, please hit that subscribe and the like button if you like the video. And as I said, we're not going to just talk here. We're actually going to go to the tank at some point here, and I'm going to show you what a successful spawning tank looks like. And you're going to get an opportunity to watch these parents take care of these young, and that's something I want to make sure that you see. And I also want to talk about, like I said, instead of painting your tank, putting this corrugated plastic in there. I think it's ingenious, because it makes it so that your tank is usable for many, many different things down the road. If you decide you don't want to use it as a breeding tank any longer, it is something that you can remove these and get right back to a normal tank. I don't want to get all over the board here, but I wanted to mention that there's going to be times when I'm going to jump in here and say things as I'm thinking of them, because I don't want to forget anything. Now, the bottom line is, as I said earlier, just before we started talking about some of the water changes and that kind of thing, is feeding your discus fish. Feed your discus fish a small amount twice a day. They will be perfectly fine, and they will be sustained. They're not going to eat their babies or anything, as long as you're giving them a food source. Now, frozen brine is good. Beef heart is good. Any of these things are good. I get right down to using just sometimes pellets and flake to feed the parents. And I notice that as we get into that second and third week of free swimming, you're going to start to see these babies go down to the bottom with the parents. The parents are going to teach them to eat that food that's in there, but you got to make it something that is easy for the babies to get into their mouth. Now, I recommend crushed flake, small amounts of crushed flake, because the first thing you don't want to do is overfeed your fish so that you're getting a ton of waste in your tank, or you're getting a ton of extra food laying at the bottom of your tank and fermenting and causing water parameter issues that you don't want, an explosion in ammonia or nitrites and nitrates and all of these things that we're trying to avoid. If you are careful, you can keep this balance really well, and if your filtration system has good colonized bacteria in there, any waste that is in the water that is turning into what I would suggest to you is waste that should be eaten by the good bacteria in your tank. If you're starting to overwhelm that, that means you're overfeeding and you can cause a lot of problems. So from the get-go, know that you don't have to feed your discus so much that you're creating an environment where your water parameters go off the charts and you have a lot of problems with ammonia spikes, nitrites, all of the things that are not good for your tank. So in feeding your fish, like I said, try to train your fish to eat things that eventually these free swimming babies will also watch the parents go down and eat, and they themselves will go down and try some of this. Now, you can also use First Bites. You can use, I think that's by Hikari. Those are First Bites. That's something you can use. You can use the powdered brine shrimp that do not have the shell on them. That's another good product to use if you don't have some of that on hand. Get all of these things because one may be the only thing that works for them. The best thing you can get your babies to do is eat a variety of foods, because this in the long term creates an environment where, as you sell them, if they move to a tank in someone else's home, these fish are going to be used to a variety of foods, and it's not going to be so hard on them. And these people will keep coming back to you if you're raising discus all the time, because they find that your fish are easy to feed and so forth. So these are all important things, and I want to talk a little bit more about the tank itself before we get into going over and looking at this tank. Number one, you want to make sure you have a air stone in there as well. Now, some people use these sponge type filtration in their tanks. I don't use that. I use a canister filter. In fact, I have a couple of canister filters. It's a bit of an overkill with the tanks that I have, because I believe the more filtration that I can put in there, the less water changes I'm going to have to do, and the beneficial bacteria that's built up into these filtered canister tanks are something that will sustain that tank long term. So I use a Wase. I'm not trying to throw names out there just to, get somebody to buy a product that I'm not even endorsing. I just happen to use a Wase because they're absolutely dead silent, and they're so efficient and so interchangeable. They're so easy to clean and take care of, and that's something that you want to make sure that you don't have to disrupt during the time that you're raising your young. The least amount of disruption that you can have with that tank, keeping your water parameters similar to what they were when the fish spawned, when they became wigglers, and when they became free swimmers, is absolutely the most important thing that you can have happen. Now, I want to talk about one other thing, and there's this 90-day syndrome that seems to be a problem with a lot of people that are raising baby discus, and that is they get to 90 days, they're away from the parents at that point, and they are free swimming, eating on their own, and then all of a sudden you start to see a die-off in your tank of your fish, and you're doing regular water changes at this point, 50%, 25% water changes every couple of days, and you're thinking to yourself, why are these fish dying? The bottom line is the reason why they're dying is because they're getting stuff that you don't think is going to happen. And the main one is gill flukes. That will kill baby discus very quickly. So one of the things that we'll talk about later in the video is a product that I think that you should get. It's a little bit expensive, but if you're selling your discus fish down the road to one of your suppliers and they've agreed to buy the fish from you for pretty good money, then this medication, even though it is a little bit more expensive, is going to be something that you're not going to have a problem buying, because number one, it goes a long ways. You can use it for a long time through several different spawns before you have to buy any new medication, because it will last you quite a while. But it's something that once you get to, I would say, 60 to 75 days, start putting this in your tank so that these gill flukes never get established and the problems just don't appear. I noticed that when I started giving my fish this medication, my baby discus, that the drop-off rate as far as deaths went, I went down to 0 pretty much. You'll occasionally get a fish that is just not going to do well because anatomically it was deformed or had problems to begin with and was just not going to make it in the long run. And these are things you can't avoid. You're going to lose a certain amount of babies as you go along and you're raising them. Now, people ask me all the time, what is a expectation for how many baby discus should survive in a spawn? And I would tell you that you can get probably 75% of your babies, once they're hatched, wigglers, free swimmers, attached to the parents, get to that 6 weeks where the parents are removed and the babies are on their own now. You should be watching them grow very quickly, and once you get to that point, you should be able to add this medication that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and that is something that is going to prevent your discus from having this 90-day syndrome, is what they call it. People call it all kinds of crazy things, but it does not have to happen, and things can be so much easier. Now, I know that what I'm talking about here is a little bit controversial with some people out there who really believe that, man, I got to buffer my water, I got to use RO water, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. It's called overkill, and every time you do stuff like that, you're creating an environment that is going to absolutely make your success go down instead of going up. Like I said, regular tap water, using just a conditioner in there, your fish will get used to that, especially fish, if your tanks, all of your tanks in your gallery or in your breeding section are using all of the same type of water right out of your tank, that is absolutely the most perfect scenario. If you've had success with your fish breeding in these conditions, then you're not going to have to worry about doing all these crazy things. As I said in the very beginning of this video, and I stand by that, chasing water parameters as far as pH goes and water hardness and all of those kinds of things is absolutely ridiculous, and there's nothing that you're going to do except for cause yourself a lot of work that you don't need to do, and you're also going to disrupt your tank to the point where you will not be successful, and you'll get burned out rather quickly trying to take care of young baby discus fish that appear to be so incredibly difficult and so much work going into this that it's just not worth it to you. Don't get yourself to that burnout point. Make it simple on you. Take my word for it. If your fish are surviving in every tank in your house is exactly the same, we're not talking about saltwater tanks here. We're not talking about brackish tanks. We're talking about just regular fish that you get, you know, whether it be a South American tank, a Indo-Pacific tank, any of those kinds of fish. All of your tap water should be fine for every single tank in your home, including your breeding tank, which is, like I said, makes the breeding process that much more simple. So now we're going to get off here and we're going to go over to this tank where I've got a new bunch of babies that have just become free swimmers in the last 24 hours, and I think this is the perfect tank to show you this corrugated plastic inserts that I put in so you don't have to paint your tank. And also I want to talk a little bit about cleaning up your tank, because that is important to do. You're going to get waste into your tank, and I want to tell you how to get that out of there without doing huge water changes or putting big things like a python in the tank, which you take a terrible risk of having your fish freak out and having your baby sucked up into your python and losing a ton of your babies right off the bat. I want to show you some simple ways in which you can clean that waste off the bottom of your tank without doing these huge water changes as we talked about earlier, and make it successful and easy for you to do. This is something you should do every couple of days. And as I said, if you're feeding your fish twice a day, small amounts, and I'm talking about the parents now, there should not be a ton of waste in your tank. But if you're seeing a buildup of waste in your tank that is more than what you think is acceptable, and you're finding that you're concerned about how much waste is in that tank, cut back on the feeding. It's not going to hurt your fish, and it is not going to, they're not going to starve to death. Discus can literally go weeks and weeks without eating. We don't want that to happen. We want them to eat every day, but we don't want to get to the point where we're being ridiculous about the amount of food that we're feeding them, because we're worried that they're not passing that on to the babies. It's almost like a baby breastfeeding off its mother. This is a very similar process, because these babies are eating off that slime coat, and that slime coat needs to be healthy, but that happens automatically with your fish. Your discus know exactly how their slime coat is going to change at different stages of your discus baby's life. The slime coat will change with that, and the parents will know exactly what the discus babies need, and they will get everything that they need. Now, we'll talk about live brine shrimp and that sort of thing, whether you have to use it, whether it's a good idea, and we'll go from there. But let's go over to this tank now and take a look at it. When we come back, we're going to go over and look at this tank. I'm going to show you how my setup is, in hopes that you get an idea of how you can do the same thing and be extremely successful, just like I have been. And we're going to be extremely careful when we go over there, because we don't want to cause such a commotion that it makes the parents so freaked out that they just start eating babies and that sort of thing, because we're at like I said, a couple of days into free swimming here, and we're still at a vulnerable stage where the parents could. But this is a proven pair where I know they've raised several batches of discus before, and I know that typically they don't eat their babies, but we don't want to get into a situation where we create the environment where they might think about doing that. When we come back, we're going to go over and check out this tank, and that will be the last part of this video. I know, as I said, this is a little bit longer video than I like to make, but I thought it was very important to spend some time on this subject and make sure that I'm pretty thorough about how to do this, and something that you're going to get a lot of information on, and you're going to feel good at the end of this video about going out and having the pleasure of breeding discus and not driving yourself crazy and making it easier on you. So when we come back, we are going to visit that tank, and we're going to show you all of the things that I've got set up there, some really creative things. We'll see you in just a second. So I want to be thorough about talking to you about this tank, and I want to make sure that I cover everything here. Now, as you can see, the breeding cone is still in there. That's something I will likely take out today, because there are no more babies on that. They're all, as you can see as I get closer, they're all swarming around the parents, and they're doing a good job of maintaining that bond between the parents and the babies, and that is a step that is very, very important, that they see those parents. And as you can see, the white corrugated plastic that I talked about on the 4 sides here, these are just inserts. This is not something I've painted on here, as I said, because I think that doing that is really unnecessary, and it's so much easier to clean these inserts thoroughly by taking them out of the tank, just by slipping them out. It's something, I'm not going to show you that right now because I'm not interested in pulling them out right now. But as you can also see, I have taped off the edges all the way around with some white. Basically, this is just correction tape. It's very simple, and it's paper that's got a great bond to the glass on it, but it keeps those edges nice and light, so that the babies are not drawn to a dark edge and get away from the parents and have problems with, like I said, making sure that they stay attached to the parents and stay with the parents as much as possible. Now, the breeding cone that's in here right now, I will remove later today. That's not something I'm going to show you right now, but it's important that you get that out of there as soon as you can. Once the babies become free swimmers for a day or two, it's not necessary to have that cone in there any longer, because at this point they are going to be drawn to that cone unnecessarily and lose a little bit of that attachment to the parents. Now, as you can see, these parents are identical, so they're a perfect breeding pair in the sense that they have exactly the same markings on them. So we know that when these babies grow up, there's not going to be any peppering on these, because this would be a type of discus where the peppering just would not ever show up on them. So we don't have to worry about that. And we also can see that these parents are good parents. They're not parents that are inexperienced, so the babies are in good hands with them, and they're going to care for them really well. And like I said, if you don't do a bunch of water changes and that sort of thing, you're going to be able to maintain a good bond between parent and baby, and they're not going to eat them with the urge to spawn again. Now, again, that comes down to minimizing the water changes. This goes everything against, we've always been taught about discus fish and how clean the water needs to be. This water, if I were to do a test on it, I can guarantee you that there would be 0 ammonia, 0 nitrites, and 0 nitrates. So we don't have to worry about this. Now, as you can see, there is a little bit of waste along the bottom. And what I do is I go in there with a turkey baster. This is a great way to minimize being intrusive in the tank as far as doing these water changes and getting, all of this stuff sucked up in there to the point where, you lose 1/4 of the water in your tank by the time you're done, and gives you an opportunity to just clean this up with a turkey baster. It works absolutely fabulous, and you can do this once a day or twice a day, whatever you feel like, whatever kind of time you've got on your hands to do it, and it works great for doing that. Now, as I said, I'll be removing this cone out of here today because it's no longer necessary. It's going to give more room for the fish to move around, but it's also going to be less of a distraction for the babies, and not a focal point where they're going to focus on whether or not this is someplace for them to attach because they think it's a parent and that sort of thing. At this point, the babies all know where the parents are. They're the darkest object in the tank, and so we don't need to worry at all about this cone that's in here being in here any longer. It's really a useless item at this point until the next time that you are setting up to spawn again. Now, I don't see any waste or algae growth, the diatom algae growing on the inserts in here at this point, so we don't have to worry about that. There's a little bit on the glass, but when I go in here, I'm going to gently go along the walls of the tank, both over here in the back, on this side, and in the front. And I'm going to do a very light wipe down, and that is going to get anything that's in the tank that's a problem as far as algae goes, and clean that up real well. And as I said, I'll go along with the turkey baster, and any clumps of waste that are in here, we'll get that out of there as well. And again, we'll only replace a small part of water that I am removing as I am removing some of this water with the turkey baster. In fact, it may be that I don't even take enough out of here to even worry about adding any more water to the tank at all. Now, as you can see, this is a tall tank. This is what we want. Gives you plenty of room for your discus fish. This again is a 20-gallon. This is made by Waterbucks. I love their tanks. Their glass is low iron. It's a great glass for viewing, and also it gives you plenty enough space, as I said, with that 20-gallon to really take a pair and put them in here with the babies, and for 6 weeks everybody's going to do just fine in a tank this size minus that cone. Now, as you notice, there is a air stone in here. That is so important for oxygenation, especially if you're running high temperatures like I am. I'm running these tanks at around 84, maybe 86 degrees. I'm not positive. I don't remember exactly the temperature on this tank, but I always run my tanks between 84 and 86 degrees exactly, and I use very high-end heaters so that we don't have a breakdown, because the worst thing that could happen is your heater break down in the middle of raising your babies, and your babies all freeze to death overnight because the water changed so dramatically on temperature and that kind of thing. So I hope this was a good video for you. We're going to have some final thoughts on this and talk about this a little bit more here, and then I'm going to close out this video. I know it was a long video and I apologize, but I really wanted to cover this really well, and I hope that you got a lot of good information out of it that puts your mind at ease and makes you think that raising discus fish might be a little bit easier than you thought, and it is a really good money maker if you can get this down really well. When we come back, some closing thoughts and a couple of ideas that will help you also with making sure long-term on your grow out and that kind of thing. That's a whole nother video, but we're going to touch on it just a little bit. When we come back, we'll do that. So in closing out this video, I want to go over just the basics one more time. A 20-gallon tank is absolutely perfect. Plenty enough room for a proven breeding pair. If you're looking for a breeding pair, the best way to do that is to get yourself set up a discus tank where you're putting 9 to 12 fish in there. That would mean like a 120-gallon to 150-gallon tank. You can even do it with a smaller tank of 75 where you can put 5 to 7 fish in there. But the more discus fish in the tank, the more settled the tank is going to be, and the more the discus are going to be comfortable. There are very social creatures. There's a pecking order, of course, but also the more fish you have in there, the more opportunities you're going to have to get a breeding pair. Now, if you want to buy all of the same discus and put them in one tank in hopes of getting 1 or 2 breeding pairs out of them, you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to understand that this does not happen overnight. It takes time for them to mature and to pair off, and hopefully pair off with a color match that is going to be something that is going to be attractive for people who are looking to buy fish, or a place that you might want to supply them with discus. Again, I love the insert idea for the tanks. It's so much easier to care for rather than painting the tanks, and it doesn't make the tank useless down the road. Thinking ahead on all of this stuff is so important, because it does not make a situation where you're wasting basically a tank that can only be used for breeding down the road. You can convert that tank very quickly with these inserts into a breeding tank, and then remove that stuff and put it right back to a regular tank of some sort, whatever you decide you want to do with it. And by doing this, you give yourself an opportunity to make it very versatile. Again, chasing water parameters is absolutely insane. Do not chase water parameters. It's not going to do anything except for make you very, very, very frustrated with the whole process. And it's the quickest way that people just say, you know, this is too hard, I'm not going to do it. If you want successful breeding, the less is more sometimes. Make sure that you've got a well-seasoned tank, something that you know is healthy, has no problems with any kind of parasites and those kinds of things. One of the things I did not mention early in the video is before you start to put a pair of Discus into that tank, make sure you deworm it and put medication in there that is not harmful, but mild medication that is going to kill any of those things, so that when you put your fish in there, you're putting them in an environment where they're not going to become diseased over a short period of time and then transfer those diseases over to the babies as they grow older. And again, making sure that the tank is tall and 20 gallons, perfectly a cube. I recommend that. Some people can buy a 29 cheap tank at your PetSmart or Petco. Sometimes Petco runs specials on these. They have their drawbacks. You have that black band around the top where the babies may be drawn to that. You're going to have to figure out a way to block that out so that they don't, get confused by the dark object in the tank, because like I said in the video, the darkest object in the tank is what the babies are going to think is the parent, and you don't want to get into a situation where you've got babies going someplace in the tank other than the parents, and it does not take long, a day or two, and you're going to see these guys drop off because they're going to starve to death. Again, the slime coat on the Discus is designed to change as the fish progress in age and has everything that is necessary to keep the fish going. Feed your fish a small amount. I'm talking about the parents now. Feed them a small amount daily. They don't need a ton of food. This will keep the waste down in your tank, keep your tank much more clean, so that there's no food that hasn't been eaten, or there isn't so much waste in there that you're causing problems for the water parameters. And what I mean by water parameters is ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates. And these are the things that we're going to focus on. We're not going to get into pH, as I said. We're not going to get into water hardness and all these crazy things, because you want your fish to be used to tap water that comes out of your tap. And again, stay away from the first 6 weeks doing so many water changes that it creates an environment that your Discus are going to want to spawn again. Sometimes this will cause a kill-off in your tank where the Discus are going, I want to spawn again. These babies are driving me nuts. I'm just going to eat them. That is the most common thing that happens, and we don't want that. So what we want to do is minimize the amount of water changes that we're doing in there. I know that goes against everything that we've ever been taught and told about with Discus, but if you have a good, seasoned, well established tank, you are not going to have these issues. Having canister filters on there that I don't like the sponge filters, as I said, because they're a draw, they look like the parents, and then you're trying to fight that, and that's just something you don't want to have to do. The best thing to do, as I said, is have nothing in the tank, bare bottom, get that cone out of there once they become free swimmers, and clean it up really well so that the next time you're ready to use it, it's already clean and ready to go. these fish are pretty good at cleaning up the area in which they're going to lay their eggs, so you don't have to worry about that. You'll see that behavior when they first start to spawn. You're going to see the female basically going around and cleaning the area on there, and you'll watch over time and figure out which one's the male and female by watching them spawn, watching the female lay the eggs, and then watching the male come right behind and lay his sperm down on those eggs to fertilize them. Thank you for joining me today. I know this was a long video. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. Don't ask me ridiculous questions. I've pretty much covered everything in here, but if you have a legitimate question you didn't think I covered, do not hesitate to leave a comment, or if you just want to comment and give me a like on this just because you like the video, that's always appreciated. And also hit that subscribe button. I've noticed with the tank about 70% of people that watch my videos are repeat watchers, but they for some reason don't hit the subscribe button, and I would appreciate it if you would do that, because that helps my channel to grow. And we'll also have a bell up in the corner there so that anyone who is wanting to be notified when a new video comes out, hit that bell up there and you will be the first to know when I release a video. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. I hope we covered a lot of ground here. And like I said, I know it was long, but I wanted to make sure that we covered everything. We will be talking about this a little bit further as we progress down the road here. We're going to have some follow-up videos on this one particular tank. That way you can see the whole process all the way through. If anything crazy happens, you'll be the first to know. If there's a problem, which I haven't had that happen yet, but if it can happen, and if it does, you'll be the first to know. If you hit that bell up there, you're going to make sure that that video is released to people who are going to be alerted that it's there. Again, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. For now, we're all done. We will see you on the next time, the next one. Until then, we're out of here.